All right. Hope everybody can hear me. Thank you, Patsy. Thank you for having me here today. I'm the University Registrar, Terry Romer. Our offices are over in Rocket Hall, room 1100. I'm here to talk about FERPA. Most students here, or you're all students, so you're covered under FERPA as students. I'm going to give our presentation that is more geared towards faculty because perhaps in your capacity as TAs and graduate assistants, you're going to be dealing with student records in a slightly different manner. You're going to be seeing class rosters, maybe doing grading, whatever your advisors are having you do. So this is geared towards faculty. I'm going to try to keep it short so there's time for questions at the end. But if at any time you want to stop me, just stop me and I'll stop and I'll answer a question. Thank you. Right. So FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Federal law from 1974, written specifically for students to protect their educational records and give them some control over those records and how they're released. Requires a written institutional policy. I am the holder of that policy. The policy is the confidentiality of student records. It's available for review on the policy website, our policy manual, and just go on the website. In the Google search box, type policies, it'll pop right up, and it's the confidentiality of student records. It indicates everything that we must do, says how we have to comply with the federal law. When a student requests records to be released to a third party, we may require written permission before we do so. Anything we release about students' educational records could contain sensitive information, right? When it's released outside, we need their permission for things like grade point average, grades, the courses they've taken, student schedules, anything like that is an educational record, and students have to sign a release. Many of you, if not all of you, have perhaps had a transcript requested, sent to this institution or another institution. That's the signed release. It says we can send that transcript to another institution. They can review your records. General public is what we call directory information. Does not require the student's written permission. Regulations allow the student to restrict that. They'd go in the MyUT portal and say, I want that restricted. No information would be released. Even the directory information, which is the student's name, the local address and phone number, college, your major, whether you're a freshman, sophomore, or graduate student, your university email address, your attendance dates at this institution, any degree certificates or awards that you've received while here, your time status, picture if you're a medical student, or your graduate medical education placement if you're a medical student. Those are things that we would release without your written permission. Those are things that we would release without any student's written permission unless they restricted it. That's what we call directory information. You go in the MyUT portal, you can restrict it, it's there, or you can just visit Rocket Solutions Central again over in Rocket Hall, room 1200. And say, I want my information restricted. We'd mark it as restricted. No information would go out. We won't discuss anything over the phone with students if their information is restricted. So if a student calls us, calls you, calls anybody and says, hey, I want to talk about my grades, I want to talk about my record, we see that it's restricted. We say, you can't do that. You have to come in with a photo ID, something like that, right? What are educational records? More pertinent to what you might be doing as a TA. They directly relate to a student. They're maintained by an educational institution or a party acting on our behalf. Grades, financial aid records, student account records, admissions application records, things that you would consider information that's landing on your transcript, information that's in the MyUT portal about you or the students that you're dealing with, right? What aren't they? Personal notes, a post-it note. Somebody came into your office as a TA. They want to meet with you. They want to meet with your faculty member. You jot down a note that they've been in there. That is not an educational record. That's a sole possession record. We don't have to back those up. We don't have to put them in the student's file. Law enforcement records are not educational records. Records maintained for individuals as employees. If I took a class here, my HR records are not educational records. However, as a student, as a TA, some of those records about your employment here would be considered educational records. There's a difference there. So say a student employee in my office, their time cards, their schedules and things would not be, I would consider those part of their educational records because they're employed in my office only because they're a student. Right? Medical treatment records are not educational records, but if it's a medical issue dealing with them as a student, some kind of medical withdrawal issue, something like that, those would become educational records. Records that aren't educational records have their own rules for privacy, such as HIPAA, things like that, and things that HR has to keep track of. But they're not covered under FERPA. Only the educational records are covered under FERPA. School officials such as yourself, right, may review a student record as long as there's a legitimate educational need. You can review some of the educational records for students in the classes. Say you're a TA in a class. Of course, you're going to have the access to perhaps their grades when you're grading their papers. You know, the professor gives you access to the grade book, something like that. That is a legitimate educational need to get the business of the university done. That is kind of a gray area. What is a legitimate educational need? And it's pretty much decided on a case-by-case basis. I think you always know what it is, and we tend to try to decide what it isn't. You would not have a legitimate educational need to look at the records of students in classes that you're not involved with. Say you know somebody in a class, you know another TA, students are dealing with some students who have, say, academic issues. You would not be privy to go in and look at their records. Only the students in classes that you're involved with, right? It's illegal for officials to look at records if they don't have a legitimate educational need. So please don't do that. It's just not something that we're interested in dealing with. We're subject to fines from the Department of Education. A student finds out, they write a letter to the Family Policy Compliance Office, who is in charge of fielding complaints from students about FERPA. They send a letter to the president. The president informs me. The ultimate fine is revocation of our ability to grant federal financial aid, right? Faculty members or TAs must be careful when notifying students about grades. This is very important for TAs and faculty. You know, we're not going to post grades in public areas. We're not going to post grades where the student's name or social security number or rocket number or any partial personally identifying information is on that paper. That is strictly forbidden. We're not going to post those. If you have to post a grade, you cannot do it in an identifiable manner. Perhaps a code number, something the faculty member knows that only the students know that is not identifiable. You don't know that student A, you know, John sitting next to you is student 1 and behind him is student 2. Something that obfuscates the ID and the personally identifiable information of that student. Don't post in alphabetical order. Make sure websites are secure. We do not recommend talking about grades with students via email. So if you're dealing with students, perhaps you've been tasked with dealing with a group of students in a class or an advisory capacity, we do not suggest that you say, here's your grades by email. Students should be referred to the MyUT portal. Say your grades are in the MyUT portal. If you want to talk about your grades, come to my office hours or come see me after class. We'll discuss your grade. The rationale is that, you know, even though it's a university-owned email address, the student presumably has to log in to access that email. Once you send that, that grade is out there. It can be forwarded anywhere. There's really no controlling it once that's sent. Students have, I think, a right and an expectation that those grades that we hold in our student information system are secured to the best of our ability. We secure them, so we ask that people don't release them in formats like email. Now, frequent question I get is, what if a student emails me and says, I got an F in that class, I don't think it's right? Well, you're not going to be able to avoid that. You know, you're going to have a conversation via email with a student regarding grades. I would just not initiate one. That is protective of you as a TA, of your faculty members, and of the advisors and other educational staff in your colleges and departments. Don't leave graded assignments for students to pick up. If we see graded assignments in the hallway just sitting there, and we find out, we'll probably come and get them because that's a FERPA violation. However, I do not recommend this because it's very difficult to track. If every single student in the class had signed a waiver that said, yes, you can put it in the hallway, you can put it in the hallway as long as you captured the signed waiver. I still wouldn't recommend that. It's also going to be very difficult to get every single student in your class to sign off on something like that, right? And we don't post things on the wall. When I was in school years and years ago, we used to post grades and test scores on the wall with the social security number. We don't do that anymore. It's highly ill-advised, and again, it's not something that we're going to continue doing, right? All right, protect sensitive information. Don't send information through email or instant messenger. You have a spreadsheet of students, grades that you're trading with your faculty member. Maybe you're helping them do their grading. If you're going to send that by email, I would say you have to password protect that file. Again, somebody forwards that, somebody forwards it to somebody else, and now 25 or 30 people have a spreadsheet of everybody's grades. That's a massive problem for me. It will become a massive problem for somebody else. We find out, it goes to the compliance office, there's an investigation. Nobody wants that to happen. So the safest and easiest way to do that is to simply password encrypt any kind of spreadsheet with students' personally identifiable information and grade information. Any kind of educational record should be encrypted if you're sending it that way. Store it on a shared drive, perhaps a departmental drive. Perhaps you have, the faculty member has access, or you have access to a shared drive. That's a better place to store it. Make sure the doors are locked, right, in your office, or if you have a shared space, make sure things are covered up if you're leaving. I was discussing it with another staff member here who's involved in other kind of security things, and they say lock your screen when you get away from your desk, close your door, close your blinds, things like that. Make sure your computer's password protected. You have, Control Alt Delete and log out, whatever. That makes sure that nobody walking by can get into your files. If you're working with student records, you don't want other people to have those. Okay. A big thing recently, I say maybe over the years perhaps, but it's getting worse in my mind, is that what's the position regarding parental access to a child's educational records? You don't think of students here as children perhaps, but the parents might, and so you get a lot of phone calls. As a TA, you might get phone calls if you're working with student records. Who can access those? Well, according to FERPA, when a student reaches the age of 18 or begins attending a post-secondary institution like the University of Toledo, so they could be a 17-year-old freshman, the FERPA rights transfer to the student. Prior to that, they are the guardian or the parent has the FERPA rights, so a high school student's parent can see their records, but a college student's parent cannot without their written permission. Parents can obtain directory information just like anybody else by requesting it through us. They can obtain non-directory information at the discretion of the institution, but only after it has been determined that the child is legally their dependent. Now, to do that, you just don't ask, is the student a dependent of yours? Yes, great, I'll give you their grades. No. What we ask is we get the federal tax records. They have to send them to us directly with a photo identification, and we would review those to see were they claimed in the latest tax year as a legal dependent for federal tax purposes. And if the answer is yes, we would okay that. Right? That's allowable under the law. But typically parents are not going to do that, and it's a difficult thing to ask them. And if somebody asks you for those things, just refer them to our office, Office of the Registrar, and we can deal with the parent directly. Right? They can obtain non-directory information by obtaining a signed consent from their students. So if you have students in your class and you have parents who are interested in knowing about their progress, if you're dealing with students in advisory capacity, say, hey, I think my student's having trouble, what about this? Well, I need a signed consent from that student before I release anything to you. I would go so far as to say is even if they come in together, right? Even if they come in together, the parent and the student, or the guardian and the student, anybody and the student, we have on our website a one-time release for a meeting, and you pull that off our website, you have the student sign it, and they say who can be in that meeting, and you have that, and you can fax it to us. You can keep a copy for yourself on file and say, yes, this parent can be in that meeting with that student. Some students may not want to say, no, I don't want my father or mother here, I don't want my guardian here, but it's better to capture that in writing, and then to deal with it afterwards is much more difficult, right? So, you can't talk about records with people unless you have a signed release. It's hard to get a signed release, so what can you do? The best thing to do is go straight to policy, talk about our university add-drop policy, billing procedures, disciplinary process, class attendance policy for your class, right? So if you're teaching a class, you're helping teach a class, and somebody says, I don't think my son or daughter is going to class, can you tell me? Say, well, I cannot, but here's our class attendance policy, and if you want to discuss it further, I would suggest going directly to your student, right? That's the tactic I would take. Now, for faculty, generally, I don't know how much it'll affect TAs. If you're writing a letter of recommendation, they don't require written authorization from the student. If they're asking you to write a letter of recommendation, they're saying, could you write this? Yes, okay, this was a great student. You can do things like that. People have probably done that for you in the past. But if you're going to include specific grades, specific GPA, yes, the student got an A plus or an A or an A minus or whatever in my class, their GPA is 3.5, you would want to make sure that the student specifically said you could release those things. Say, I need a letter written on my behalf to say I got a 3.9 and I got an A in that economics class or whatever. And you can say that. Otherwise, say no. They were, give them your personal impression of the quality of the student. Amendments to FERPA. So probably as TAs and faculty, you're not going to be dealing with this too much because they would go straight to us and by the Legal Affairs Department. But there are amendments to FERPA pursuant to the Patriot Act of 2001. Generally, we require written permission and consent from the parent or student before an educational agency may disclose identifiable information from educational records, but if you get orders from the Attorney General of the United States, an ex parte order, some kind of subpoena, we can release those based on the fact that we are getting that from the legal entity and they're saying, yes, you have to release this. It's part of a terrorist investigation. Exceptions for health or safety and emergency, right? If there's a campus emergency, if we need to know where a student is, if there's an outbreak, some kind of violent action going on, we have to be able to find out and tell people where students are. We can use our professional judgment, and we're in pretty good hands. So I would not use FERPA as a reason to not tell people where, if there's an active shooter or something like that, if there's something you've got students around, you have to tell them where they are. You have to find out where things are going. You just have to use your professional judgment. To avoid FERPA violations, don't leave graded assignments in public. Don't circulate printed class roster with any kind of name, ID, or grade. Don't provide anyone with a list of students enrolled in your class for commercial purposes. If somebody calls you and says, hey, I'm selling textbooks or something like that, could you give me a list of students in your class? Or hey, I'm interested in, we get a lot of these advertising to local apartment buildings. Can you give me a list of students in your class? Say, refer them to the office of the registrar because we would fulfill a directory information request and we would have to have them submit that in writing and have legal affairs office review that. Don't provide a student schedule or assist anyone in finding a student, even the campus police officer, unless there's a verified campus event. If a police officer says, hey, I think a student's in your class, we've been trying to catch them, there's a warrant out for their arrest, can you tell us where they are? You cannot. Unless they come with a subpoena or a warrant or something like that, or an ex parte order and it's part of a terrorism investigation, it doesn't matter if they're campus police, it doesn't matter who they are, you cannot tell them that. Don't discuss personal information with the student when others are present. So if you're doing advising of some sort, if you're talking after class, make sure you're doing it very discreetly. It's best to just have them come to your office hours if you have those. Now some final things to remember. Whoops, I went too far. It's everybody's responsibility. If I catch violations or my staff catches violations, we typically follow up on them. It's just easier if people are following the rules, and I'm sure everybody here intends to. But I will be honest, it can be difficult when you're dealing with big groups of students and you're trying to figure out how to contact students. I'll tell you what, if you have to email a group of students about a specific class thing, something's changed, you're not meeting a certain place, make sure to blind carbon them. Right? So if you're emailing a group of students, make sure to put all their email addresses in the blind carbon. Even though those students' email addresses might be directory information, if it's the rockets.utoledo.edu, any one of those students may have a confidentiality flag set, and there's no reason why anybody else in that class should see that email address just because they're in the class. And says, check the confidentiality of students to ensure compliance with privacy restrictions. For those of you that might be like teaching a class or attached to a course, if you look at your class roster, it will say next to their name, confidential. If you don't have any assignments like that, like teaching assignments directly that we record in our system, ask the faculty member who does to provide you with a printed off class roster with their names, rocket numbers. It will say confidential. That way you will know. When in doubt, contact the registrar's office regarding FERPA issues and student privacy. My direct extension is 7804. You can always call me. If you can't catch me on the phone, leave a message and I'll try to get back to you. That's about it. If you have questions, please contact us. You can ask me now. Sharon Standifer, I don't know if, there we go. Sharon Standifer is our main contact point. Her number is 4836. She normally gives this presentation. She was unable to today, so I'm filling in for her. But, you can email her, call her at 4836. Of course, let's see what we got here. That's the main line. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now, or else I'll let Patsy just go on here. Okay.
If a student's parents email maybe a teaching assistant about absence or something,
Okay.
should you forward the email to your mentor or the OL? You have to reply?
Okay. So I believe that, correct me if I'm wrong, the question was if a student's parents email you about something in the class, attendance I think was the example, Should you reply to them directly or forward it to, say, your faculty or your faculty advisor, something like that? My suggestion is, you might want to talk about those issues directly with your faculty advisor before you get into that and find out what's their personal preference, if they want to field all those questions themselves or if they want to just have you do that. Either way, if you're going to respond to that email, you essentially respond and say, here's the attendance policy in this class. Or you don't want to respond in any way that would divulge anything specific about that student. Or you could say, you could just refer them to us if you like, and if they're asking about questions about what they're allowed to know. But certainly I think that's something you want to discuss with your faculty advisor, find out what is their policy, and then I would expect that faculty advisor would comply with those things that we just did, because they've all had the same presentation. Right? Any other questions on this? You can always call us, me directly at 7804. If you want more training, we can schedule one-on-ones. If you're ever in a situation where you really don't feel like you know what to do, the best thing to do is to do nothing. I always say the best thing to say is nothing. When somebody asks you a question, just say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to answer that. Let me find somebody who can help you, right? And then call us, and we will handle something for you. It's just better to be very cautious about this than to get tripped up in a situation where you accidentally divulge somebody's grade point average or their course performance, and then it's kind of downhill from there, right? So thank you very much. I appreciate the time, and thank you, Patsy.